And I think I can see Professor Philip Kotler. I should say thank you very much for sitting there. And this is an amazing, because last time we met was in Jakarta, right? This is truly amazing, because I think in '96 I was doing my MBA, and your book, of course, is the book that I read in marketing. And so to kind of be here is pretty crazy. And I decided at some stage I was going to set about the task of going to crazy places, trying to find crazy things, and to try and make them seem not so crazy, and to see if they would become a craze. Now that's quite tough, because if you think about what you guys have done, right, got rid of Saddam Hussein, and then you got a president with the middle name Hussein, which is kind of insane. You know, the task is very hard. But along the way, what I decided, and the other disclaimer is, in trying to answer this question, and I won't duck the question, is I'm an academic and I'm a consultant. I'm a marketing academic. Marketing is my bread and butter. I'm not a holy man. I'm not a religious leader. I'm not part of any groups. I'm not a politician. So the focus of me giving you this information, or the approach that I'm taking, is because I genuinely believe that business and education are the two ways that we're going to solve a lot of these problems. And this Islamic thing is a problem, right? So within that, my approach is looking at cultural phenomena. And if you think, is it about studying Sharia? Yeah, to a certain extent. But also, you know, I bother myself with questions like, why do babies like milk and adults don't? Or, you know, why do some people like bitter food? Why do people get tattoos? You know, watching sport, watching the European Champions League football, listening to music. Why is hip-hop a cultural phenomenon? All of these things, you might say, what has that got to do with religion? Because if I was a football fanatic, it's not such a big thing as opposed to a Islamic or religious or Muslim fanatic, right? So I kind of went on this journey. But then several years ago, I was faced with this challenge. I've never wanted to be stereotyped. You know, one of the things as a professional is you don't want to be known as that black guy who's an expert on black things. But then I decided that, well, I thought I would decide to be positively stereotyped. I thought, why not? What's the worst that could happen? The worst thing that could happen is that, you know, people decide that you are someone they should talk to about Islamic stuff or Muslim stuff or halal stuff or Islamic finance stuff. Yeah, it's a fantastic after-dinner conversation, right? Especially if you're a Muslim, which you might think, why would you do this? And, you know, I became a Muslim 14 years ago, before September the 11th. So this is kind of, you know, this is really crazy stuff, right? So why am I still here, and why am I thinking about these things? Well, I think one of the things that I'd like to talk about is, and you know, Ambassador Chin mentioned BRIC. About a decade ago, we had this idea of BRIC: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And then about a year or so ago, more acronyms came out, and I wrote an article recently in the Guardian newspaper, and there's this acronym MINT, right? Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. And then we have CIVITs, right? Colombia. Where are my Colombian brothers? Okay, so there you go. This is why they're here, right? Colombia is the next hottest thing. Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, and South Africa. So I thought to myself, what about the population figures? I went to the Pew Research Forum and looked. What a surprise. This thing called Islam or Muslims, they're getting bigger. They're coming all over the place, right? The countries that have Muslim majorities or high Muslim populations, Indonesia is about 210 million, Turkey's about 75 million, you've got your 50-50 split in Nigeria. This thing is getting bigger, this elephant in the room. And then you've got the UK, people are converting to Islam, 2/3 of which are women. Then I go to Marseille, and 1/3 of the population are Muslim, and they reckon it's going to be the first Muslim majority Western city. These things are kind of crazy. So, to try and answer your question, when I've been thinking about some of these things, essentially, you know, being the academic, you know, I go off into the wilderness, and, you know, today I've come with my A game, right? I picked the tie, the shoes to match the chair. You know, I thought Northwestern University, I've really got out there. I've really tried.
I think your leather's a bit better quality.
Yeah, I just didn't brush my hair. Sorry about that. But the thing that I wanted to pick up on is this idea of words and terms. Islam and democracy. Does that work? Is one a religion? Or even, you know, if I was writing a chapter recently on diversity in business schools, and I was impressed by the fact that if you go to Israel, you know, you can have Jews being a race, Arabs being a race, or is it a religion, or we don't quite know. There are these fluid and flexible terms. And one of the challenges I faced was, how do we deal with these terms? Because as a business person, you have to. But most of the terms don't make sense. East and West does not make sense. It doesn't make sense in the East either. You know, we had this thing called what? The Middle East? I'm guessing that once upon a time that was the East. And then someone thought, oh my goodness, there's more to come?
That's the British.
Between India and Egypt, Middle
So
East.
then we got this thing, and we got, you know, my mother's from the West Indies, right? So we've got this thing. Yeah, none of it makes sense, but we're stuck with these terms. I can't say don't use the word black, right? But what does black mean now? If you're going to get a music award, then yeah, everybody's black, right? You know, if it's about cracking a joke, everybody's black. And the thing that I learned, though, was, you know, my father is white and Scottish, and my mother is black and Caribbean. I didn't know that I had a black mother and a white father until I went to school. My classmates and my teachers told me so. Prior to that, they were just mum and dad. So the thing is, right, and this is true, the thing that I thought then is, with all of these terms, if the terms aren't helping us to understand things better, why are we sticking with these terms? Or we have to stick with the terms. How can we reinterpret them? Which is why I went back to some of these other things. So this idea of democracy, and we've alluded to this fact, what does democracy mean? What does Islam mean? Does it even matter what it means? Is it more that we should be trying to look at things from other people's perspectives? So to kind of round up, I would say, yeah, Islam and democracy, of course they're compatible, if you define what Islam is or democracy, or maybe we shouldn't even define what those terms are. But I think there are two take-home words that I want you to think about: osmosis and surrogacy. Osmosis, because, you know, for some of you that have studied science, it's the idea of transferring particles from high concentration to low concentration. It's not just about two-way communication. And this extends to innovation or scaling up or whatever. It's taking stuff from here to there and creating an equilibrium and having porous boundaries where that can happen. You need rules. I'm not going to advocate not having rules or saying, let's not look at the Sharia, or let's do away with religion, or let's do away with national identity or anything like that. They need to remain. Surrogacy, because it's not just about understanding, it's about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's about being adopted or looking to be adopted. So most of my time in trying to go to, you know, Ethiopia or Iran or Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan or all of these places has been to put on the turban, to sit on the floor, to go in the desert, but actually to do those things because they're really important. Is to try and see things from other people's perspectives. And that, I think, ties in yesterday with something that resonated with me, which was this idea of education and this idea of plasticity of the mind. The only way that you can cope with things like trying to understand these geographies and youth culture and, you know, all of these other emerging phenomena is plasticity of mind. But also, I'm going to link elasticity of time. Time is relative. If I gave you top tips today, they're not top tips tomorrow. A lot of this stuff is perishable. So really, I suppose part of me being here today is to wave a flag to say it's about us forming a network where we can call upon each other. You know, Jackie's in Jakarta. You know, and so I knew, I had this gut that Gangnam Style was going to be big in Jakarta because I looked at the maths, I thought they're into K-pop, they're into cosmetics from Korea, they're learning Korean, and lo and behold, I go to Jakarta a couple of years ago, and there's a whole army of people, you know, waking me up at 6 in the morning doing Gangnam Style, in the car park, headscarves, no headscarves, whatever. I was right. So I think the thing is that it's about trying to form these links together and not being so pre-concerned with the dogma that, and we should leave that to the religious leaders and the politicians. As business people, we can see that things go across countries. I mean, if you were to go to Kazakhstan now, they'd say, of course, Apple is an important brand because Almaty, yeah, grandfather of the apple. All apples come from Kazakhstan, apparently. It was Alexander the Great that took them to Macedonia. But it's this idea that I want us to think about, which is, do we have to be caught up with the dogma of terms? Do we have to prescribe things? Or is culture something that we can organically or intuitively act in a certain way, just as we have over the past couple of days, that you just go up and talk to somebody? And actually making mistakes is okay because that's part of human existence, right? But you know, if we are too cautious, you miss out. And I think that's something that I kind of learned upon my few years of journey, and I've taken up too much time and it's drinks.
That's right, Jonathan, mate. You're holding us up.
Mohammed, I'm sorry.
Okay, so question is, understand the conflation between Muslim and Arab.
So most of the women in the Islamic world are not in the Arab League.
Okay.
And most of the Muslims in the Muslim world are not in the Arab League.
Okay, so most Muslims don't exist in the Arab world. So who wants to tackle that? So, question is, and then I'll hand over, so just so everybody knows, is really where's the voice for the Muslim populations in countries like India, Indonesia, and other countries where sometimes they are the minority, but a very large one, like in particular India. So where's that voice? So
I would say on social media, and it's quite generational, because you mentioned India, there's what, 160 million Muslims. Pakistan will overtake Indonesia, I think, in 30 years' time, if you believe Pew. You know, there are some really large figures, and you're right that, you know, whilst Islam revolves around Arabic as a language, the majority of people cannot speak Arabic and are not Arabs. And even if we go back to the geography and you look throughout the history, you know, the boundaries have shifted. I noticed in your slide, Rahila, it had kind of, I think, was it the Arab world or something? But it had Iran in there. If there were Iranians in the audience, they'd be tutting because they're Persians, right? And even...
Well, in my book, there were no Persians. They're all Arab women. That was just the map.
Yeah, but I think the map was highlighted as with Iran, and obviously
But
the parts of Iraq that used to be part of Persia, and Afghanistan and Uzbekistan and all of these areas. It was quite a challenge for me going back through the old maps and thinking, okay, how do all of these things jigsaw together? But I think that there's a big generational gap amongst the younger population. There is a big connection. So one of the things is, you could say, computer literacy. Southeast Asia is a hot spot for that. I think in the top 10 tweeting cities in the world, Indonesia has 2. I think Jakarta and I don't know if it's, yeah. So, and Saudi Arabia is in the top 10 as well. Then you've got London and you've got, you know, New York, I think. So you're seeing amongst this younger population, they are connecting. And I write for a fashion magazine coming out of Singapore. And, you know, largely you know, you've got a massive population of female entrepreneurs. Fashion is cool. It's cool to wear a headscarf and look good and all of these things. If you don't believe me, go on YouTube and type in Mipsters from the United States. There were women on headscarves, on skateboards and things like that. But I think that, you know, you're seeing that this kind of supposed minority that actually are a majority are being more vocal. And then France is connecting, Bosnia is connecting, the UK is connecting. But I think the other thing that I'd like to add to that is the role of English. And one of the things that I've written about is never before has English been so important in Islam. Because I've been to conferences over the past year. You go to Dubai, I went to an Islamic Economy Summit. There was the World Islamic Economic Forum in London, with, you know, seeing David Cameron there, unbuttoning his jacket and talking about Sharia-compliant student loans in the UK and Islamic bonds. You know, you're seeing something where everybody was talking in English. You know, from Jordan, from, you know, most of the world leaders, including Afghanistan, from Malaysia, they were all talking in English. And I think one of the things in response to the title, which says leading in it, I would say, are we going to have leaders in the Muslim world anymore? Or are the younger generation going to present a leaderless opposition? If we think about the Arab Spring, is it really about leadership? And I know a lot of the Muslim world is preoccupied with this idea of creating the leaders of tomorrow. But what if people arrive at consensus through leaderless opposition, through anonymity, through social media? And that's really what young people are doing. And I think Indonesia is especially strong for that. Malaysia's doing it. And, you know, if I look in my neighborhood in London, for example, my nearest mosque is about 100 yards away. It used to be a pub or bar. I'm in America, right? But no one was going. The Muslims bought it, they got permission, it became a mosque. Another pub down the road is now a shisha bar. They gave it the alcohol license. And you know what Muslims are like, right? It's okay to smoke, but it's not okay to drink. So I think that, yeah, we're seeing it's a generational change, but that is linked to computers.